Hello all, this is the Owl, or at least so I've been led to believe. And today, yup, we're going back to the Abyss. With Corpse Party Part 3 out of the way, and my two next projects to tackle, namely that Made in Abyss video game's second video, or I guess it would be the third at this point, and of course that other manga you got a teaser for at the end of the last video, are still in the very early stages of scripting. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the absolute saddest elements and moments within the Made in Abyss manga. But, as always, we're going to go a little bit further, in that we'll be taking a close look at these moments and attempting to figure out why they managed to hit so damn hard. With that out of the way, let's dive on in. Yeah, I've never made any bones about my love for Fabuta as a character. Everything about her, from her movements, to her expressions, to her speech, is just a perfect balance of absolutely charming and utterly horrifying. First encountered by the party in the early stages of the Villager arc, she slowly became somewhere between a primary antagonist and a tragic figure, as the exploitation of her mother as a food source, an incubator for hollows, and finally, well, a living space, resulted in her millennia-long quest to achieve vengeance on the villagers. This brings her into direct conflict with Reg and the rest of the party in what turn out to be easily some of the strongest narrative and character-based beats in the entire story. However, it's all just really sad. See, as we get to know more about her history, it turns out that she and Reg were friends and, I think, lovers a long time ago, with a lot of her behavior and speech being modeled directly after Reg's sensibilities. While they were separated and he lost his memories, she waited patiently for him for what I think is thousands of years. This all comes to a head when they eventually engage in direct combat with each other, and this fight is interspersed with scenes from their past together, particularly this sequence of panels showing us a really funny scene involving Fabuta kind of comically attacking Reg and removing his helmet, paralleled to the same thing happening in the present with a much more serious and violent overtone. This cute pairing of antediluvian lovers is replaced with them very nearly becoming enemies, and there's something about this idea of two people who once genuinely loved each other now being in such different places in terms of their own goals that they have no choice but to engage in physical conflict that just bums me out. But as this does have something of a happy ending, as anyone who's read a little further in the manga will be able to attest, it places a bit lower on this list. Nonetheless, Fabuta Best Girl, don't at me. Ah, that scene. That one that launched a million reaction videos and cemented Made in Abyss as a disturbing anime staple for so many people. Here, we have two orphans, Nanachi and Mitty, and they are brought down into the Abyss by the mad scientist Bondrewd to serve as grist for his horrible human experimentation. Nanachi ends up becoming a sweet-smelling furry bait thing, and Mitty ends up becoming a doubly cursed blobfish nightmare fuel. To make matters worse, Mitty is also apparently completely immortal, with Bondrewd endlessly experimenting on her further, causing her form to be further corrupted, leading Nanachi to make finally putting Mitty out of her misery her life's work. She is finally able to achieve this with the help of Reg's incinerator, in a ridiculously sad scene early in the manga. That's sad enough, but when the party enters the village, Nanachi learns that Mitty has essentially been cloned by the village as part of a covenant with Belaf, resulting in Mitty once again being endlessly abused, this time being fed upon, which was always Nanachi's greatest fear. And this forces Nanachi to kill Mitty a second time by taking her outside of the village and letting her disintegrate. Bloody hell, man. As we learn in the flashback portion of the Iruburu arc, which is done a little differently in the anime release, Faputa's goal isn't simply to eradicate the villagers, it's to finally put an end to her mother's suffering. Irumyui, a young native girl, fell victim to Wazukyan's plots and experimentation with the incredibly powerful and dangerous cradles, egg-shaped relics that grant the true desires of whoever possesses them, which led to her becoming, that, and eventually the village itself. However, her consciousness is still present in some form, which is why her final child, Faputa, aims to end her, which she does eventually succeed in doing, leaving her and the party as the only survivors of the village arc. What makes this hit so hard is not only Irumyui's frigging tragic backstory, but Faputa's own reaction to her success. She's lost Reg, probably made an enemy of him, lost Gaburuon, and now has nothing left to live for as she tumbles down into the void. Yeah, it does have a bit of a happier ending than this, but wow, I won't lie, this sequence really got to me. Yeah, this absolutely had to be on here, because where do I even start with this one? As the party enters the fortress of Ido Front, they encounter a young girl, Prushka, who quickly befriends the trio, despite her being the adoptive daughter of Bondrewd himself. And yeah, this character immediately became a fan favorite with her unique appearance, quirky nature, and of course her adorable but still slightly off-putting little Digimon pet mania. On top of this, Prushka was genuinely fascinating as a character. Her evident love for her father, which was at least somewhat reciprocated, albeit in a weird way. This is Bondrewd we're talking about, of course, an ultra-powerful body-swapping immortal with a very strange idea of how to pack a lunchbox, pitted against her new friendship with Riko, and of course we get that moment, where we realize that despite or possibly because of Prushka's efforts to save them, she was turned into a cartridge with mania licking at the unmentionable fluids leaking out. I'm surprised people don't refer to this more when they're talking about disturbing Maiden Abyss content, generally in favor of Nanachi and Mitty's elevator fun times, because this, in my opinion, is so much worse. Poor Vueko. This character's entire life is basically one long series of frigging tragedies. Adopted by a horribly abusive douche cannon, she achieved the briefest moment of happiness with her adoptive daughter Yui and her lover Pakoyan. And then, where do we even start? First, everyone got sick, Yui included, and then Yui got mutated into a brood sow, let's say, and eventually the village itself. But not before Vueko and the other Ganja members chowed down on her dead nightmare babies. Then, after Yui became the village, Vueko was stuck in her head? Yeah, I'm still not entirely clear on Dogu Upu, as this somehow conferred immortality, or at least very slow aging, to the extent where we and Vueko weren't even sure if she was human or hollow. Next, of course, she got to watch Faputa cut a swath through the village before meeting her own fate when ascending a staircase, unaware that the protective membrane of the village had been ruptured, and this caused her to fall victim to the curse and mitify, after which she eventually succumbed to a head injury and died. But not before her lover sacrificed herself in a failed attempt to save her. Yeah, there's a name for this character trope, I think, but Vueko is basically the Charlie Brown of the story, in that she's a cosmic plaything. Through no fault of her own, nearly anything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong for her. And yet, she's always a likable, sympathetic, and good-hearted character who, again, literally did nothing wrong. And if there's any character in Made in Abyss that I feel genuinely bad for, it's this poor woman. So, there we have it. An analysis of Made in Abyss's 5 saddest scenes. Next time, hopefully something a bit more substantial. But regardless, cheers, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, you could always stick around. There's a decent amount of existing content, and plenty more coming down the pipes. If you want to help myself or Mrs. Owl out and make sure that Mrs. Owl is at least somewhat less sad than Vueko, you could always check out our Patreon, or leave us one of those new super thanks things, which frankly, until today, I'd never even heard of. And if you want to chat with us, shoot the shit, give feedback, or just have a space to talk about Made in Abyss or other anime, you could always come over to our Discord. It's been an absolute blast thus far. Anyway, cheers my friends, take care, and I will see you next time. This is the Owl, signing off.